few more minutes or should we get going?
I think we're good. We got
Okay, John, are we ready with the recording? Yeah.
We are recording. Go ahead.
Okay. All right. Y'all can hear me okay, I take it. All right. So good evening and welcome to this meeting of the Minnesota State Historic Preservation Review Board for the National Register of Historic Places. The date is August 12th, 2025. My name is Lindsay Rulon Miller. I am currently the chair of the Minnesota State Historic Preservation Review Board. Our purpose this evening is to consider the nomination of properties to the National Register of Historic Places. As most of you know, the National Register of Historic Places is a federal list of those places deemed worthy of preservation. A nomination form has been completed for the properties that we will consider tonight. The nomination form has been sent to the review board members, and each member has had an opportunity to study it prior to this meeting. The owners of the nominated properties, local officials, and interested local groups have been notified of this meeting. All have been invited to send written comments about the nomination and to attend the meeting. Some of you may wish to speak this evening about the properties. You are welcome to do so, and I encourage you to address yourself to the question of whether that property meets the criteria established by the National Register of Historic Places. These criteria are the standards by which the review board will evaluate the nomination. This evaluation is the board's only assignment. These criteria have been established by federal regulation. Copies of the criteria have been sent out to the owners of the nominated properties and to the other parties I mentioned earlier. A description of the National Register of Historic Places program has also been sent to them. The nominations will be presented by a staff member. Persons viewing the meeting remotely will then be given an opportunity to comment. These comments should be limited to 3 minutes. The Minnesota State Historic Preservation Review Board will then discuss the nominations and a vote by the board will follow. Should a nomination be determined this evening to meet the criteria for inclusion in the National Register of Historic Places, the nomination will be forwarded to the Deputy State Historic Preservation Officer, Amy Spong. Should she agree that the property meets the criteria and the nomination is in proper form, she will sign the nomination and forward it to the National Register of Historic Places office in Washington, D.C., where it will be reviewed once more. The process is a lengthy one, but it is calculated to subject each property to rigorous evaluation. Board members, if you plan to recuse yourself from a particular agenda item this evening, please make that known during roll call. As I take attendance, please introduce yourselves, briefly stating the role you fill on the review board and your particular expertise. So I will start with board member. Now I'm going to call on everybody, whether you're able to come tonight or not. So starting with board member Anderson.
Hi, I'm Kristen Anderson. I'm one of the architectural historians on the board, and I'm recently retired from Augsburg University.
Thank you. Board member Gladhill.
Sorry, unmuted. I'm Bethany Gladhill. I'm a member at large on the board, and I am a preservation consultant with a barking dog.
Thank you. Board member James. Board member James, not present.
Hello, I am Elliot James. I am Associate Professor of History at University of Minnesota Morris, and I'm one of the historians on the board.
Board member Lavasser. Board member Lavasser. Okay, come back to you. Board member Olson. Okay, I think board member Olson's out tonight. Board member Radford.
Sorry, microphone trouble. I am Casey Radford. I am one of the historical architects on the board, and I am a historic architect in the Twin Cities.
Thank you. Board Member Sanders, I believe, is out tonight. Board Member Schulke.
Good evening. I'm Chris Schulke. I'm with the Otter Tail County Historical Society. I'm a member at large and one of the historians on the board.
Thank you. Board Member Solomonson.
I'm Kate Solomonson. I'm one of the architectural historians on the board, and I recently retired from the School of Architecture at the University of Minnesota.
Thank you. Board Member Stark. Board Member Stark.
There it was. It is difficult to unmute. You have to hit the button on the bottom and not the one on your picture. I am a historic architect and a little technically challenged today. And I am a 1 year plus retired, 95% retired architect, still dabbling a little bit.
Thank you. Board Member Terrell.
Good evening. I'm Michelle Terrell. I'm the historical archaeologist on the board, and I am a cultural resource professional.
Thank you. Board Member White.
Hello, I'm Frank White. I'm a member at large, and I'm a historian.
Thank you. Board Member Worcester.
Mike Worcester. I'm with the Morrison County Historical Society, and I'm one of the historians on the board.
Thank you. And has Board Member Levasseur joined us? Not yet.
Not
Okay.
seeing the name on the participant list.
Okay, thank you. I am Board Member Rulon Miller, and I am a member at large, and I work at the Minnesota Historical Society in Capital and Public Art. So thank you for introducing yourselves, everybody. We would now like to hear from Deputy Amy Spong and the SHPO staff regarding any updates. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Rulon Miller. Welcome, everybody. It's really good to see you all. It's been a while. It's been since May. So happy to see everybody. All your pictures just kind of popped up on of our board members. I was only seeing a couple before, so it was nice to see you all, even if it's for a brief moment. And I just want to welcome the public that might be joining here. Maybe it's your first time, maybe you've been here multiple times, but want to welcome you all to our remote virtual meetings, board meetings. So with that, I do have a few announcements. I do want to introduce the SHPO staff that are on the call. Myself, I'm the Deputy SHPO, and we have David Mather, our National Register archaeologist, who is helping assist this evening. Doesn't have any nominations to present this evening. We've got Ginny Way, who's presenting all of the nominations this evening. She's been very busy. Ginny is our architectural historian for the National Register. And we have John Disher, who is behind the scenes, handling all of our WebEx technical kind of issues. If anyone does have any challenges, John is hosting the meeting, so you can feel free to reach out to John if you're having any sound or visual or any kind of challenges. We do want to make sure, because we are conducting official state business virtually, we want to make sure everybody can hear each other and be heard as well. So let us know. And then we also have Katie Manthe Mimbach, who she's joining. This is her first state review board meeting. She is helping with the minutes and recording the meeting. She is filling in for Lillian Egner this evening. Many of you, well, I don't think we've shared the news, but Lillian has a new baby boy since May, so she is on leave. She had Philip Andrew Orth on July 29th. So we have another kind of SHPO baby in the mix. And so she will be rejoining our office and will be back for the November board review meeting or state review board meeting. So, but welcome, Katie. We're glad you're here and we're willing to jump in and help us out. We have 2 new listings, recent listings, August 4th and August 5th, actually. The one is from our last meeting, I believe, which is the Luther Memorial Church, for those of you who might recall reading that nomination in South St. Paul. And then an older, which was an additional documentation of the old Frontenac Historic District, finally is listed. So that one I think came through last year. We had to do a little extra stuff on that, if I recall, Jenny. So that one is finally listed. That had an expanded period of significance and made some corrections and expanded some of the context studies, the context and themes that were part of the original nomination. So it's always good to hear that. I also, you may recall at our May meeting that we were, many SHPOs and TIPOs were very anxious and stressed because our federal funding that funds all the SHPOs and TIPOs was frozen for fiscal year 25. There was a big call to action. A lot of federal preservation professional organizations, state level, local level, there was really a call to action and everybody really came through. And I'm happy to say our funds were unfrozen. They were not part of any rescission bills, but early July, we got the news and it was excellent news. It was about 3 months later than we typically hear that. So things are pretty stressful, but I do want to thank, if any of you reached out to lawmakers or made a phone call or anything, I just want to thank you all. We did hear back from a lot of lawmakers. Our national conference of SHPO officers did hear back that the White House was inundated with calls about HPF funding, and many lawmakers' offices were inundated, and so that really was a successful effort, and it was just a good showing that we can all kind of unite around common, needs and concerns when we need to in the preservation community. So thank you if you were part of that effort. We still have a bit of a ways to go for FY26. There have been no decisions made on the HPF for FY26. But we have a little bit of breathing space to get us through with our FY25 funds. So again, thank you. Let's see. I think I've got all my my announcements. I do want to just say, for those of us who might be joining us, maybe this is your first National Register review meeting. We don't want to use the chat feature for any public testimony. You'll be called upon to be able to unmute yourself and to speak, to give some public testimony or to answer questions. We just want to keep the chat kind of free of any testimony because the meeting is being recorded, but the chat isn't always picked up. And if you do have like a technical issue or something and your chat is working, feel free to use it to alert us. If you do want to say something, you can certainly use the chat function and just say, I'd like to say a few things, or I'd like to answer a question or something. You're more than welcome to do that. So Ginny, David, any other announcements?
I don't have any, thank you.
Not from me, thank you.
All right, thanks everyone. And I'm gonna sit back and turn my camera off now and enjoy the presentations.
Thank you, Amy. All right, so the next item on the agenda is to review the minutes from the May 20th, 2025 meeting. And then I would ask the board if there are any corrections to the distributed minutes. I don't see any hands, but that said, it's hard for me to see all the hands. I only see 6 of you. So if there is a hand, somebody help me out. If there's no corrections to the minutes, do I have a motion to approve the minutes?
Board Member Schulke, so moved.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Board Member
Board
Stark.
Member Gladhill, second.
All
Go
right,
ahead,
I'll let
Gladhill.
John take it.
We'll say Gladhill because you got the whole sentence out. Okay, so thank you. And we will vote by roll call to approve the minutes then. Board Member Anderson.
Aye.
Thank you. Board Member Gladhill.
Aye.
Board Member James.
Aye.
Board Member Levasseur. No. Board Member Radford.
Aye.
Thank you. Board Member Schulke.
Aye.
Board Member Solomonson.
Aye.
Board Member Stark.
Aye.
Board Member Terrell.
Aye.
Board Member White.
Aye.
Board Member Worcester.
Aye.
Thank you. And chair votes aye. Meeting minutes have been approved.
Chair Roland Miller.
Thank you. Yeah.
Board Member Anderson, you didn't call on the dog to vote. Do you want to add
I don't
that?
know the dog's name.
That's easy enough.
This
Dogs,
one
they're
is
happy.
Winston.
Winston.
He
Winston.
votes aye.
Votes aye.
Mr.
Thank
Churchill.
you.
They're
All
very
right, thank
excited
you.
that I'm somewhere they can both get to.
All right. So now we'll move on to the presentation of nominations portion of tonight. For our nominations this evening, we will use the following format. There'll be a staff presentation of the nominations followed by the summary of correspondence received. At that point, I will then invite and call on those who would like to speak about the specific property. For those who are joining us virtually, we ask that you use the chat function to say that you would like to speak. Or if you are unable to access the chat, you can raise your hand. Yes, there's a raise hand button at the bottom to indicate that you would wish to speak. Please do not use the chat function for any other purpose. For those wishing to speak, we ask that you keep your comments to 3 minutes. So our first nomination for this evening is the Capone Art Park in Dakota County, presented by Jenny Way. Thanks, Jenny.
Thank you, Chair Roland Miller. I am going to share my screen. All right, you should be seeing it now. Hearing nothing to the contrary, we will get started. So tonight's first nomination is the Capone Art Park in Eagan, Dakota County. Lauren Anderson from New History is the author. The Capone Art Park is located near the center of the Twin Cities suburb of Eagan. The modern-day park is composed of approximately 60 acres, 20 acres to the north of Dilfee Road and 40 acres to the south. The southern 40 acres primarily function as cattle pasture until the construction of the, the Dilfee Road underpass in 1993 and is therefore excluded from the proposed historic district. Here we see the entire 60 acres of the land owned by Capone, shaded in blue. The red box outlines the proposed historic boundaries. The 20-acre district is a wooded site with pedestrian trails built into the natural contours of the landscape. It holds a private residence, an art studio building, handcrafted site elements such as stone walls and an outdoor fireplace, and over 24 metal, stone, and concrete sculptures. At left is a generalized depiction of the distinct zones within the district. At right is a contemporary map of the resources throughout the district. Anthony Capone was born in Italy in 1921. He immigrated to the United States in 1936 to Akron, Ohio at the age of 14. After graduating high school, Capone obtained a scholarship to the Cleveland School of Art, but was drafted into the United States Army during World War II and returned to Italy as an Army interpreter. At left is a view of the trail and ravine in the West Trail Zone, camera facing north. At right is a view of the stone walls and gravel drive near the property's entrance, camera facing southwest. After returning to the United States, Capone enrolled in the Cleveland School of Art. He then moved to Minneapolis, where he studied sculpture and received his undergraduate degree from the University of Minnesota in 1948. He subsequently received his master's degree in art education in 1949. After graduation, Capone joined the faculty of Macalester College in St. Paul, where he taught until his retirement in 1991. At left is a view of Snake, camera facing east. At right is a view of the walkway, stone wall, and metal fence along Dilfee Road, camera facing east. While at Macalester, Capone worked to develop a permanent connection for the college's art department, and also succeeded at elevating the appreciation of studio art to the same level as other academic subjects within the department. Capone was also the driving force in the creation of the Janet Wallace Fine Arts Center at Macalester, the first building in the country designed and built specifically for teaching the fine arts, which became a prototype for liberal arts colleges' art facilities nationwide. At left is a view of the gravel drive, a view to the northeast. At right is a view of the sculpture Pompeii along the gravel drive, camera facing southwest. Capone's significance as an artist in the United States received official recognition in 1955 when he was first listed in Who's Who in American Art, an honor that would continue for 6 decades. By 1980, his creative works were located across Minnesota and other locations in the United States, as well as Italy, and in public collections at the Minneapolis Institute of Art, St. Cloud State College, and the Minnesota Museum of Art. At the heart of Capone's artistic philosophy was the inspiration and instruction that he took from nature. At left is a Pioneer Press photograph of Anthony Capone at his 1972 Minnesota Museum of Art exhibition. Capone's at the far left. At right is a photograph of Capone in the publication Currents at the Art Park in 1990. Capone's artistic philosophy also encouraged a desire to integrate art into everyday experiences of individuals. The culmination of Capone's achievements and ideas can be found in the Capone Art Park. The shaping of the acres of rolling hills surrounding his home into artistic landscape was Capone's longest-lasting project, spanning his entire productive life as an artist. It is an artwork created on and with the canvas of nature, designed with the ultimate purpose of making art more accessible to the general public. At left is a view of the trail in the East Zone, camera facing south. At right is a view of Old Crows, camera facing northwest. I'm sorry, that's at center. At right is a view of Nugget, camera facing southwest. In the late 1960s and 70s, the advent of earth art led some artists to take outdoor sculpture to a new level. Capone Art Park was developed and established during this heightened interest in outdoor sculpture parks. In contrast to other gardens or parks in the area, the landscape at Capone Art Park formed not just the backdrop to man-made sculptures, but also the substance of Capone's art. Capone worked within the existing natural setting, preserving and enhancing it to provide a seamless integration of art and nature. At left is a view of the walkway near the studio, camera facing east. At right is a view of the core zone from the knoll, camera facing southwest. Capone repeatedly emphasized the difference between his art park and a typical sculpture garden concept. In interviews, Capone stated that the park would not resemble a typical sculpture garden where, quote, walls of plants make rooms in which to display individual pieces of art, end quote. Rather, the development of the landscape followed his overall artistic philosophy. At left is a photograph of Tree of Life in 1969. On the right is an undated photo of the Minneapolis Sculpture Garden that opened in 1988, contrasting the philosophies guiding art parks at the time. Capone discovered the art park site in 1949. At that time, Eagan was a rural farming community on the verge of explosive residential development and transformation into a suburban area. Unlike the typical residential development occurring there at this time, Capone did not intend to develop the land into rows of tract housing. At left is a view of the Anthony Capone home, camera facing northeast. At right is another view of the home and its stone walls, camera facing southwest. Instead, he began to sculpt the site into a unique homestead and work of art. Caponi designed the home himself, enlisting the help of an architect friend, and completed all of the construction work by hand. Caponi intended his house to harmonize with its natural surroundings. At left is the main level living room, view to the southeast. At right is the same room, this time a view to the west. Caponi intended his property to be a home, a studio, and a classroom. The first showing of Tree of Life sculpture was made to Caponi's art students at Macalester. Throughout his time at Macalester, Caponi brought groups of students to the property to learn and relax. At left is the distinctive tile work in the home's lower level bathroom, view to the west. At center is a 1957 photograph of Caponi and his students looking at the Tree of Life. At right is a view of the home's main level kitchen, view to the south. By 1974, Caponi had also begun constructing his own studio building to the southeast of his house. It was completed in 1987. At left is a view of the studio, camera facing east. At right is the interior of the studio, ground level, camera facing northeast. When Caponi retired from Macalester in 1991, the developing park featured prominently in his retirement exhibition. While Caponi Park was formally open to the public in 1994, Caponi repeatedly emphasized that the park was designed for continued evolution and would perpetually be an unfinished work. He continued to shape and develop the landscape until his death in 2015. At left is a view of Lumberjack, camera facing southwest. At right is a view of Caponi in the studio area in 1991. The period of significance for this property is 1949 to 1994. The level of significance is local. The National Register criteria are B and C. The areas of significance are art and landscape architecture. This property also meets criterion consideration G. The period of significance begins in 1949 when Caponi purchased the property and began construction on his home, and ends in 1994 when Caponi opened his land for public enjoyment, shifting the primary purpose of the site from personal canvas, studio, and classroom space to a public gallery. As a site of exceptional significance within the context of Anthony Caponi's work, the park meets criteria consideration G, properties that have achieved significance within the past 50 years. More than just an outdoor gallery to display his works, the rolling acreage of Caponi Art Park is also the canvas and substance of Anthony Caponi's art. The site was Caponi's home, his studio, and as a professor and the head of Macalester's art department, often his classroom. The park is the best representation of Caponi's significance as an artist, as it is the work most strongly associated with Caponi and clearly demonstrates his artistic philosophy about the interrelationship between art and nature. It is also a notable and unique local example of late 20th century outdoor sculpture park. For these reasons, the Caponi Art Park is eligible for listing in the National Register of Historic Places. There is no correspondence related to this property.
Thank you, Jenny.
You're welcome.
All right. Is there anyone joining the meeting virtually or a member of the public that would like to speak on behalf of this nomination? If so, please raise your hand or say so in the chat. Okay. I don't see any hands unless somebody else does. John, is there anyone signed up to speak?
No, we have nobody signed up for this nomination.
Okay. Thank you. So seeing as there's nobody from the public who has a comment to share on behalf of this nomination, I can close that portion. And the public comment period then is therefore closed. So in order for the board to discuss, may I have a nomination regarding or motion regarding this nomination?
This is Board Member Solomonson. I would like to make a motion to recommend that the Deputy State Historic Preservation Officer approve the nomination for listing in the National Register of Historic Places.
Thank you. May I have a second?
Board Member White, second.
thank you. Is there any discussion related to this nomination?
And this is Jenny, real quick. If y'all are intending to speak, will you please turn on your cameras? Thank you.
Hi, this is board member.
Oh,
Hi, this is board member James. I just have a question. I don't know who asked the question too. Why is the period of significance start in 1949? Did Capone intend to develop the site into an art park that would be preserved at that moment? I'm just had a lot of questions about, okay, 1949 is when he bought the land. It's just very interesting to me. I just wanted a little bit more conversation about like why it begins in 1949. Yeah, as
Yeah,
the beginning of the year of independence. Yeah.
thank you, board member James. I think if I recall correctly, that's also when construction on the house begins. But if that's not accurate, then maybe we should take a look again at the beginning of the period of significance. I don't know if Lauren or anyone else from New History is here. Perhaps. Oh, I think Cheryl Capone is here. Who has
Excuse
raised her
me,
hand.
I had
Yes.
Shannon, are you here from New History? I'd much rather you do the speaking than me. I just didn't
I
see
am
you in the
Cheryl.
list. Okay, you take
Yes,
over,
I
please.
am. I'm here in place of Lauren Anderson because she is currently out of the country on vacation. So I'm mainly here to take down questions that she can address in her revisions to this. And I don't know that I could speak quite as intelligently as she could on why 1949 was chosen, but I do believe that the acquisition of the property was the justification
That was the year that the house was built.
as well. Thank you, Cheryl.
So that would be the beginning of the period of significance because that's the first time Capone did influence the landscape with the intention of whatever his intention was. Obviously, if it had not become an art park, then we might be talking about a much smaller property here. But yes, that's a very good question. Thank you. The acquisition, I don't think would be a good enough justification for the beginning of period of significance.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other
This
comments
is board
or
member.
questions?
This is board member Gladhill with another sort of question that might get us deep down a rabbit hole, so I don't want to go too far.
Good times.
I tried to do a little research about other art parks, particularly of this time, and there aren't many, which is great. So this is exciting, and this is a fantastic property that I'm so glad is undergoing nomination. How, particularly with the landscape, does that get maintained in the future? Like, if a large area, if there's a storm, does it come to us that takes down a lot of the trees? How does that?
I can address the question with regard to what happens with the nomination and the State Review Board roles and responsibilities. So if the nomination is listed and there is a reason why the boundary would need to be changed, it would come back to the State Review Board. It will not come to the State Review Board if new art is put up or if work is being done on the property in general. However, because it is now publicly owned and it is listed, there are regulatory responsibilities by the State Historic Preservation Office that would review changes. And I would be happy to discuss that at length, but we may want to do that sometime when we're not boring other people.
No, that makes a lot of sense. I noticed that a lot of the pieces of art that were not by Capone were not listed as contributing resources. So that was kind of feeding into my question.
Yeah, so his work and his legacy as an artist is really what we're honoring and is significant within this nomination. There may come a time when the additional pieces of art also gain significance, but we're not there yet. That has not been yet articulated. And Chair Rulon Miller, you may not see it, but Board Member
I do.
Terrell had
Yeah.
her hair.
Board
Okay.
Member Terrell, please. Yep.
I'll see if I can get us into the weeds too. I thought this was a really interesting and well-written nomination, and I really support the listing of this unique property. I had a question, well, two comments related to the sculptures. One would be sort of directed at the authors. There seemed to be a numerical inconsistency in the tabulation of the sculptures. In the first couple pages, it said there was 39 of them, but then when we get into the more detailed inventory, there was only 38 listed. So it may just need to be reviewed for consistency, or maybe I missed something, but I just wanted to raise that. The second is with regard to the Tree of Life sculpture. It says that it's no longer standing, and from the photos, it appears that there's just a small remnant of it that remains. It certainly is a significant part of the story of the property and needs to be a piece of the narrative, but I question whether there's enough integrity of that particular sculpture for it to be a contributing object to the district. But it definitely needs to be included in the nomination, but I just think as a contributing item, it's missing its integrity. Unless there's some piece of it on the property still that that wasn't covered. That's my comments.
Thank you, Michelle Terrell. Sorry. Thank you, Board Member Terrell. Just to clarify, Tree of Life was not counted, as I recall. And so what you're saying is that we should be making sure that it's articulated, even if we continue to not count it, or was it actually counted as a contributing object?
I read it as contributing in the list, in the detailed list. It wasn't, at least the parentheses of non-contributing was missing.
Okay, thank you very much. I will check into that.
Any other comments from the board? Board Member Worcester?
Thank you. I was trying to go back and reread the section on the ownership of the property. Can it just be clarified? Is it privately owned, publicly owned? Is there a formal arrangement at work here? I just want to make sure I was clear on that.
I will answer. And if I am incorrect, will the author or Ms. Capone please correct me? But my understanding is that the land itself is owned by the city of Eagan, and that the Capones have the right, a formal agreement to continue to reside on the property, and presumably to make moderate changes, or they will work in tandem to make changes to the property.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Not seeing any other hands, but feel free to put one up if you have a comment or a question before we move to vote. All right, seeing no other hands up, the motion for the board is to recommend that the Deputy State Historic Preservation Officer approve this nomination for listing in the National Register of Historic Places. So we will now vote by roll call, starting with Board Member Anderson.
Aye.
Thank you. Board Member Gladhill.
Board Member Gladhill votes aye.
Thank you. Board Member James.
Aye.
Thank you. Board Member Radford.
Aye.
Board Member Schulke.
Aye.
Board Member Solomonson.
Aye.
Board Member Stark. Board Member Stark, are you there?
We seem to have lost him. I'm not seeing him in the list anymore.
Okay. Let's go to Board Member Terrell.
Aye.
Thank you. Board Member White.
Aye.
Board Member Worcester.
Aye.
Thank you. And Chair votes aye. Motion passes. Thank you, everybody. All right, we'll now be moving on to our next nomination this evening, which is the Frederick Martin Hotel in Clay County, presented by Ginny Way. Ginny.
Thank you very much. All right. As Chair Rulon Miller said, this is the Frederick Martin Hotel in Moorhead, Clay County. Laurel Fritz and Tamara Halverson from Pigeon Consulting are the authors. The Frederick Martin Hotel is located at 403 Center Avenue in Moorhead, Clay County. Center Avenue is within a historically commercial strip of Moorhead and is one of the primary streets connecting Moorhead and Fargo, North Dakota, just west of the river. At left is an aerial view of Moorhead showing the relationship to Fargo. At right is a closer view of the property in its immediate context. The hotel is highlighted with the yellow box in the center of each photograph. The Frederick Martin Hotel was designed by the then Minnesota-based architectural firm of Foss & Company. During the mid-century period, Foss became a regional leader in modern architectural design. The hotel features hallmarks of the international style, including simple rectangular massing, ribbon windows and regular fenestration patterns, clear expression of internal programming, and a complete lack of applied ornament. At the same time, the design was rendered in red brick, a common material in local construction, allowing the building to maintain a dialogue with its neighbors. At the time of its construction, the hotel was the only tall international style building in Moorhead. At left is a postcard of the hotel circa 1960. At right, we can see the north elevation, camera facing south. Construction on the hotel rooms were completed in May of 1950, with the 7th floor restaurant, the Treetop Room, completed in July of that year. The formal grand opening was held in September, and the hotel was greeted with a great deal of fanfare at the local, state, and national levels. At left are the west and south elevations, camera facing northeast. At right are the south and east elevations, camera facing northwest. After World War II, local businessmen began to promote the idea of a first-class hotel in Moorhead. It was noted that Fargo had multiple hotels that could accommodate large gatherings, and it was believed Moorhead was losing business and prestige to its sister city. At left is a detail of the primary entrance at the north elevation, camera facing south. At right is a view of the public lobby, level 1, camera facing southeast. Plans for the building were publicly announced in April of 1947. M.O. Foss was the architect, and in December of 1947, Minneapolis-based Standard Construction was chosen as the contractor. However, construction for the building was plagued with setbacks, many of them financial. Its ultimate success required the Standard Construction Company to save the project from foreclosure by paying off liens and agreeing to run the hotel. At left is a view of the first floor lobby in 1950. At right is the Barn Restaurant on the first floor, also in 1950. Because the hotel project was a significant one for Moorhead, the Chamber of Commerce was also invested in seeing it come to fruition. In early 1949, by unanimous vote, the Chamber committed to raising $100,000 to ensure the completion of the hotel. At left is a view of level 7 sunshade track, corrugated metal paneling and ribbon windows, camera facing east-northeast. At right is a view of the ribbon windows at level 7, camera facing northeast. The architectural language that would eventually be called the International Style emerged in Europe in the 1920s as architects sought to develop a system of rational design as a response to the chaos and destruction of World War I. While the style would not gain traction in the United States until after World War II, it was introduced to American audiences in 1932. At left is the Treetop Room, 7th floor, in August of 1950. At right is the Ballroom, also on the 7th floor, also in 1950. The property was profiled in the art section of the December 25th, 1950 issue of Newsweek, which heralded the building's, quote, contemporary design, end quote. At left is a view of the bank lobby, including the secondary entrance. At level 1, camera facing northwest. At right is a view of the dumbwaiters at level 2, camera facing north. In 1962, the hotel was sold to the Rochester, Minnesota's Kaler Group. Kaler operated the hotel until 1971, when it was sold again to a local consortium organized as the FM Hotel of Moorhead Incorporated, which planned to restore the hotel. The endeavor was short-lived, however, and in May of 1973, the hotel closed. At left is a view of the typical double-loaded corridor, camera facing north. At center is a view of the historic parquet floor in the lower level, camera facing southeast. At right is a view of the terrazzo staircases, camera facing west. In 1975, the building reopened as an office building, the FM Center, with a bank as the ground floor tenant. At left is a view of the typical office spaces on level 5, camera facing east. At right is a view of office spaces on level 2, camera facing east. At right is a view of the office space on level 4, camera facing south. Forgive me, that was left, center, right. The period of significance for this property is 1950. The level of significance is local. The National Register criterion is C, and the area of significance is architecture. The period of significance is the year the Frederick Martin Hotel was constructed and opened for business. The Frederick Martin Hotel is a distinctive local example of the international style as applied to tall building in Moorhead. For this reason, the hotel is eligible for listing in the National Register of Historic Places. The property is undergoing rehabilitation as part of the Historic Tax Credit Program and has an approved Part 1 by the National Park Service. There is no correspondence related to this project.
Thank you, Jenny.
You're welcome.
All right. Is there anyone from the public that is interested in speaking on behalf of this nomination? So please raise your hand or mention in the chat. Okay, I do not see any hands up. So if that is the case, we will close the public comment portion. And now, in order for the board to discuss, is there a motion regarding this nomination?
Board Member Schulke, I would like to make a motion to recommend that the Deputy State Historic Preservation Officer approve the nomination for listing in the National Register of Historic Places.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Board Member Worcester seconds.
Thank you. Any discussion from the board? Board Member Solomonson. Oh, hand down.
No, hand is still up. I just,
It's still up.
I just unmuted myself.
Oh, there you go.
The more I read about this nomination and the more I looked at the building, the more interesting it became to me. And so I'm really happy to see it here. Its design is such an interesting, it's so early for a post-war international style building. And and as a result, there's a lot of experimentation happening here that draws on pre-war elements. So there's that bilateral symmetry of the main facade with an entrance that is a two-story entrance, or at least it's looking like one without marble around it. I love the way that there are these horizontal string courses that separate the rows of windows, and that was a pre-war strategy that people used in order to give kind of the look of ribbon windows, even though they're really not. And then those little curved metal pieces at the very top, and that fabulous ribbon window that with its glazed corner, that must have been the swankest restaurant in the region. It really must have been. But in any event, this is such an interesting experimental version of the international style. On the side, it looked like a postmodern, ironic, little twist against the international style, because it has those square punched windows all over that facade. So in any event, the one thing I would suggest, I thought it was a really marvelous nomination, and I would just suggest a few tweaks that addressed the variety of things that are happening here. But in all ways, this was just a great nomination.
And thank you, Chair Solomonson. Do you have anything specific that you would like to send forward, or I can also discuss with the authors some of your thoughts?
You could, sure, you could, and the other thing is I'll send you some notes.
Perfect.
Okay.
Thank you. That would be great. Thank you.
Thank you. So we'll go with Board Member Worcester and then Board Member Anderson to follow.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Two items. This nomination reminds me that you don't have to look at a building and it doesn't have to be wow to say it deserves to be on the register. I think to an untrained eye, it seems like a square box, but it's more than just a square box. And I think the other part of it too is more personal. I will admit I spent some time in the Treetop Lounges when I was younger, and in the mid to late 80s, it was literally the only place in Fargo-Moorhead you could go hear jazz music.
Whoa,
there's,
do you happen to have any photographs? Not necessarily of you, but of the room.
No on either account, but I will just simply say that was the case, and that it really was a nice place to go. And so I was gratified when this popped up and I looked at it, I thought, oh yeah, good, I'm glad. So, and another part of it is I'm going to maybe speak a little out of turn here. Moorhead, unfortunately, has done a great job of tearing down a lot of its recent history, and I'm glad to see that this building is not going to fall victim to that mentality.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Board Member Anderson.
Yeah, thanks. I agree with what Kate had to say, and I would like to follow up on that just a little bit. I was really intrigued to see in the illustrations a couple of drawings from Thorshoff and Cerny, who were pre-hot modernists in Minneapolis at the time. One drawing is dated 1950 and one is 1960. And the Northwest Architectural Archives also has two drawings, 1950 and 1960. I wonder if they're the same. I wonder if there's something going on there that might add to what Kate mentioned about how experimental this is and kind of surprising to see. If there's anything available in the Thorshoff and Cerny part of this discussion.
I see that at least some of the consultants are here. Would Pigeon like to address what they may or may not have found in the architectural archives?
I think video shots us down. We are here.
Thank you.
This is Tamara, Board Member Anderson. Thorshoff and Cerny did some of the interior layouts at a later date, and we don't currently have a hotel layout. We didn't talk about this as significant under A as like a big deal hotel in Moorhead because of that. So like, while I take your point, I think we struggle with, we don't see it in the building at this time. What I can tell you is it's going to be a hotel again. So with something on the top, I can't promise jazz, but and though that layout has actually informed how room layout will place. So it certainly informed what's happening next, but we didn't feel from an analysis standpoint within the criteria of the National Register that there was anything we could tie to really. But I think your point about the experimental nature of this is well taken, and I think explaining that they worked with architects who were the vanguard of experimental modernism in Minnesota is a point we could easily add.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments, questions? Board Member Schulke.
Well, yes, I just want to reiterate what Mike Worcester said, because Moorhead has kind of been the whipping boy of what not to do with preservation, losing so much of it. And now we've had the hotel here and also the potato warehouse, I feel, a few years back. So at least they're making an effort, how a little late it may be, but at least that should be, they should be applauded for that.
I think Board Member Stark also would like to say something.
Oh, Board Member Stark. Oh,
yes,
it looks like.
my story,
got locked out. My computer completely shut down and I had to run around and find an iPad. And it doesn't have a hand to raise. I had a couple questions on this. I wasn't really sure where that area that an infill had been made, if that could be dashed in or something, maybe it's not that big a deal. And the other question was in 1960, there's a photo of the street side and it talked about the area around it has changed a lot. And I couldn't relate to what the current condition is, or couldn't find a picture in that back and forth, if there was something that could be added to visually cover what was described.
Thank you. I will take a look at those, the current photographs to see if there's anything that discusses the setting or that visually describes the setting a little bit more or illustrates the setting. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? No. If not, we will head to a vote. The motion before the board is to recommend that the Deputy State Historic Preservation Officer approve the nomination for listing in the National Register of Historic Places. So starting with Board Member Anderson.
Aye.
Thank you. Board Member Gladhill.
Aye.
Thank you. Board Member James.
Aye.
Board Member Radford.
Aye.
Board Member Schulke.
Aye.
Board Member Solomonson.
Aye.
Thank you. Board Member Stark.
Aye.
Board Member Terrell.
Aye.
Board Member White.
Aye.
Board Member Worcester.
Aye.
Thank you. And chair votes aye. Motion passes. All right, we'll be moving on to our third nomination for this evening, which is the Grazer Roadside Parking Area in Hennepin County, presented by Jenny Way. Thank you, Jenny.
Thank you, Chair. I apologize. Y'all have to listen to me all night. Okay. Here we have the Grazer Roadside Parking Area in Robbinsdale, Hennepin County. Carol Zelli of Landscape Research, LLC is the author. Grazer Park is a 4-acre highway wayside rest area situated on Trunk Highway 100 between West Broadway Avenue and Bottineau Boulevard in Robbinsdale, Hennepin County. It is the northernmost wayside rest of the Beltline, known as Lilac Way. Grazer Park includes 15 contributing structures and 8 non-contributing structures within a single contributing site. On the left is a map of the property showing the relationship of the parkway within Minneapolis's western suburbs. The property is colored in green and there is a bright red arrow. On the right is a more detailed map of the area. The proposed boundary is outlined in red, which may be difficult to see in this case, so we've outlined the general area of the parkway in yellow. The park was built in 1940 and 41 under the supervision of the Roadside Development Division of the Minnesota Department of Highways and the National Park Service. Minnesota landscape architect Arthur R. Nichols was the consulting landscape architect for MHD, and Harold E. Olson, the engineer, and Carl F. Grazer, the project engineer. However, it should be noted the planning for the larger Beltline, of which the park is part, had begun more than 2 decades before the Depression-era federal relief funding made construction possible. Planning for Minnesota's first modern Beltline highway began in the late 1920s. The idea was concurrent with general trunk highway improvement projects and planning. Carl F. Grazer joined the Minnesota Highway Department in 1922 and became known as the, quote, father of the Beltline, end quote. In addition to his design and construction supervision for the highway, he is credited with promoting the Beltline concept and looking for funding. As projected, the Beltline loop would incorporate existing roads as well as entirely new segments stretching between County Road 5 in Edina and Trunk Highway 52 in Robbinsdale. The Beltline was regarded as a model of modern highway design and became an important component of the Twin Cities economic development. At left is a Minneapolis Journal, July 28, 1935 article promoting the Beltline. At right is a 1941 photograph overlooking the Beltline at Grazer Park. Construction for the Beltline was underway by 1934, financed almost entirely with federal relief funds. It was Minnesota's largest highway construction project undertaken with relief labor and received only 1% of its funds from the state. At left is a view of the park overlook, picnic and lawn area circa 1942. At right is a view of the park facing southeast toward Trunk Highway 100 across the rock garden. The RRD designed the Beltline to have stopping points that were intended for relaxation and casual picnicking. To make those more appealing, Grazier Park was not designed to be directly accessible from the Trunk Highway, but only from local streets. The park would have been in full view for the southbound drivers and, depending on road elevation, also from Bottineau Boulevard and the southbound ramp back to the Beltline. The Beltline would have also been visible to park users through designed breaks in the vegetation. At left is a view facing southeast. At right is a view facing southeast across the overlook from Lakeland Avenue. Grazier Park and the other Beltline roadside parks exemplified rustic-style landscape architectural principles as guided by the National Park Service in the 1930s. NPS guidelines emphasize preservation of natural topographical contours, existing vegetation, and aquatic features, with landscapes designed to be enjoyed throughout the year. At left is one of 4 benches in the rock garden, camera facing northwest. At right is a view of the entire rock garden, camera facing east. Among the architectural principles of the rustic style was reliance on masonry techniques that gave stone structures naturalistic shapes and uneven textured surfaces, with an avoidance of symmetry and rigid straight lines. Plantings were used to integrate structures with their settings while avoiding the appearance of new installations by avoiding linear planting arrangements. At left is a view of the rock garden, steps, and bench, camera facing northwest. At right is a circa 1942 view of the rock garden, including benches and fountain. The largest and last of the wayside rest to be completed, Grazier Park, was placed at what was then the end of the new highway. Sited to conserve a portion of the site's sloping topography, it was adjacent to a planned cloverleaf and fully furnished with rustic-style overlook, rock garden, beehive fireplaces, and public facilities. At left is a view of the fireplace and picnic tables, camera facing east. At right is a view of the picnic area, camera facing west. The landscape design of the Beltline and its roadside parks is credited to consulting landscape architect Arthur R. Nichols. In 1902, Nichols was the first graduate of the landscape architecture program at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, where he also trained as a civil engineer. He partnered with landscape architect Anthony Morell in 1909, and in 1933, Nichols became the first registered landscape architect in Minnesota. At left is a view of the northern edge of the rock garden, camera facing northwest. At right is a view across the rock garden toward the overlook, camera facing northeast. Grazier Park represented Nichols' effort to integrate naturalistic principles and the rustic style with evolving modern highway design and landscape architectural practice. His naturalistic design conserved the sloping topographical character of the narrow site and some vegetation, and introduced compatible new plantings and limestone rustic-style structures. Minnesota's RDD wayside seldom utilized more than one type of stone. At Grazier Park, the use of 3 different stones is distinctive. At left is a view facing northwest toward the overlook and Lakeland Avenue. At right is an overall view of the park, camera facing northeast. Between 2001 and 2004, Trunk Highway included the reconstruction of the Trunk High 100 and Bottineau Boulevard intersection, reconstruction of the southbound ramp of State Highway 81 and Trunk Highway 100, the replacement of the Broadway Avenue and BNSF bridges, and the widening of West Broadway Avenue. That is to say, I'm sorry, I got lost. That is to say that there was a lot of work here at the Grazier roadside parking area. 2 10-foot shoulders and 2 sidewalks were added at the time, and the loss of the park area and trees and shrubs resulted, as well as the filling in of the slope of the western stone stairway. The steep slope between West Broadway Avenue and the Grazier Park Rock Garden was recontoured. And we're seeing at left is a view of the park with new interpretive signage, camera facing southeast. At right is a circa 1940 view of the infilled slope. The rustic guardrail is non-extant and the presence of the staircase is unknown. So that's what constituted the rehabilitation of the project of the park, was the reconstruction of Trunk Highway 100. Although highway reconstruction has reshaped portions of the eastern and southern edges of Grazier Park, the restored 4-acre park remains noteworthy for its National Park Service rustic style landscape that includes a distinctive beehive fireplace and a rock garden. Rehabilitation in 2023 by the Minnesota Department of Transportation followed the Secretary of Interior standards for the treatment of historic properties. At right is a view of the distinctive beehive fireplace, camera facing northeast. At left is the 1937 drawing of the fireplace type completed by Carl Grazier. The period of significance for this property is 1940 to 1941. The level of significance is local. The National Register criterion is C, and the area of significance is landscape architecture. The period of significance encompasses the years of construction. Grazier Park meets registration requirements 4A and 4B of the Federal Relief Construction in Minnesota 1933 to 1943 multiple property documentation form. It is the largest, best furnished, and only remaining intact example of the original 7 parks of the Trunk Highway 100 Beltline, better known as Lilac Way. The park remains a distinctive example of the Minnesota Department of Highways and Roadside Development Department's roadside parks. For these reasons, the Grazier roadside parking area is eligible for listing in the National Register of Historic Places. There is no correspondence related to this property.
Thank you, Jenny. All right, looking to see if we have any members of the public who would like to comment on behalf of this nomination. So please raise your hand. And I am not seeing anybody. If anybody else is seeing anybody, let me know. All right, if not, we will close the public comment period. In order for the board to discuss, may I have a nomination regarding, or a motion regarding this nomination?
This is Board Member Gladhill. I would like to make a motion to recommend that the Deputy State Historic Preservation Officer approve the nomination for listing in the National Register of Historic Places.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Board Member Terrell, I second.
Thank you. Any comments from the board or questions? Board Member Stark.
Yeah, I grew up visiting relatives on Highway 100 from a little kid on, and seeing Minnetonka Boulevard and some of these other areas that existed. And I was always intrigued by them, and the fact it was Lilac Way and there were lilacs planted there. So I went over and looked at this site today, and it's huge. I had never known it. You can also not see Highway 100 from it at all. The woods along there is dense, and it's really hard to see in that area. And I'm wondering if in the report, a couple of different things. They mentioned the 7 spots and locations where there were, but there's really no map that shows the interrelationship of them and how frequently there were. If it's possible to add something like that and make a bigger map than what was here to show. Okay. I knew the one at Minnetonka Boulevard, and there's one by Nordic Wear that where they moved some of the stuff, but it'd be nice to be able to document where all these were. The other thing was there's no lilacs planted any place in this whole area in the park. As I walked around, it's dense, and maybe it was on the map that was shown at the park, but Lilac Way would have lilacs, and it just seems that they should be either located or mentioned that they were here or planted along 100 where the woods are or something. I don't know if anybody can answer that. Or if they're planning to plant, because they talked about a lot of volunteers that are planning to plant.
I don't know that I am aware of any additional information regarding the vegetation. The author's not here tonight.
Yeah.
I know that, well, I'm not sure. I'm not sure if MnDOT is planning to replant lilacs on Lilac Way.
It would seem to make sense, but you never know. It's
Logic is a tricky thing.
right. It's a beautiful park. If you haven't had a chance to visit, I'd highly recommend going there. It's huge though. It'd be a great place for a picnic. It's isolated. But my great uncle built his house on Highway 100 by Excelsior to be able to see the highway and to see the moving traffic, because that's what everybody did. And that's what these parks really were designed for. So thank you.
Thank you. I have to admit, this slate of nominations did lead to a number of weekend site visits for my family and I.
Any other comments?
I have a comment, Board Member James. I think the nomination talked a little bit about the lilacs and introducing Lilac Way in section number 8, page 28. But it seemed like, lilacs, they were supposed to be there, but they weren't going to be there, and they planted something else. So it's funny to me. I've never heard of my comment is I've never heard of I don't even know what you call it, a structure like this. Is this, does this happen a lot? Because
The Wayside Rest itself?
Yes, yeah. Because it just seemed, I've just never heard of anything like that, let alone being preserved. But and from the photographs and the description, there was a lot of thought put into it. My big question was like, I read a lot about Nichols, like, why isn't it Nichols Park? And then I'm reading like the different titles, Grazer was the project engineer, and there was another engineer, and there was an architect, but it was just very like, this person put a lot of thought into making that site what it is for a really long time, and I've just never heard of anything like that. So it blew my mind reading.
It's
this nomination.
fascinating. I have lots of documents about Wayside Rests. I would be happy to give you just an incredible amount of context related to what was going on in the 1920s, 1930s, and of course, and then with regard to how interesting it was to travel, right? And how we think about gas mileage and the availability of infrastructure and whether or not you're going to stop and eat at restaurants. These pull-offs were everywhere along highways across the United States, and in many times they were improved as part of the Civilian Conservation Corps work, because it was something that benefited the public, that was easily accessible. I'm sure there was a lot of administrative red tape that was cut by being owned by the state and on land that was that didn't need private permission to be on. So we're talking about, a Depression era culmination of an interest that really kind of began to sprung up in the 1920s with regard to watching cars. Who wants to do that now? Like, no wonder they let all the trees. Nobody wants to sit and look at the highway, but we certainly did for a number of decades have a fascinating interest in watching cars go by. So yeah, if you want more, just reach out. I'll be happy to give you more. Lots and lots.
This is Board Member Gladhill. I did a historic context study for Golden Valley a few years ago, and this was that kind of other end of Lilac Way was a huge element for that. And they were particularly distressed that so little of that remained for them, because it had been such a feature of defining that area. So I was particularly happy to see this nomination come through, and having the beehive is amazing.
Thank you. Board Member Worcester?
Thank you. 2 items. It helps remember when some of the stuff was built. Highway 100 really was the edge of the frontier when it came to the metro area. It was out there. We don't think of that now or even back in the 70s, but in pre-World War II, that was the limit of it. The other thing is, I noticed in the bibliography they referenced that TPT documentary from 2001, which led me to realize when I saw this nomination, it kind of surprised me this property had not already been nominated some time ago. And so I'm glad to see it here, because I had assumed wrongly, apparently, that it already was on the register. just because of its uniqueness and significance.
It now is our opportunity to formally list it. I can't speak for MnDOT, but I am sure that Andrea at MnDOT has been well aware of this property for an incredible length of time.
Yeah.
And thinking about the 2001 and 2003 is probably when they started thinking about what they were going to do with Botno and Trunk Highway 100. Like, it takes a long time for these transportation projects to come to fruition and be completed, and then the preservation and the rehabilitation happens after the road work is done. So this has probably been floating around at least somebody else's office for a very long time.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? All right, seeing none. We will now vote. The motion before the board is to recommend that the Deputy State Historic Preservation Officer approve the nomination for listing in the National Register of Historic Places. Those in favor, please say aye. Those opposed, say no, starting with Board Member Anderson.
Aye.
Thank you. Board Member Gladhill.
Aye.
Board Member James.
Aye.
Board Member Radford.
Aye.
Thank you. Board Member Schulke.
Aye.
Board Member Solomonson.
Aye.
Thank you. Board Member Stark.
Aye.
Board Member Terrell.
Aye.
Board Member White.
Aye.
Thank you. Board Member Worcester.
Aye.
Thank you. And chair votes aye. Motion passes. All right, moving on to our fourth nomination for this evening. We will be reviewing the Ordine Building in St. Louis County, presented by Jenny Way. Thank you, Jenny.
You're welcome. Two more, y'all. We got this. All right. This is the Ordine Building in Duluth, St. Louis County. Phyllis Brower of Hess Royce and Company is the author. The Ordine Building is located at 424 West Superior Street in Duluth, St. Louis County. The building is 6 stories with a full basement. Due to the steep grade change in the downtown grid, the basement level is exposed on the south side of the building, but concealed on the north side. The west facade overlooks the public plaza that extends along North 5th Avenue West between West Superior and West Michigan Streets. Here we see the property within the context of downtown Duluth. The building and plaza are outlined in orange and yellow, respectively. They're at the center of the photograph. Designed by Duluth architects Damberg and Peck, the Ordine Building is precast concrete. The exterior has an exposed, smooth concrete structure with incised joints that reference historical architectural details. The rear or east elevation is a blank wall. Here we see the north and west facades, camera facing northeast. The plaza was constructed in 1971 as part of a streetscape improvements of 5th Avenue West from West Michigan Street to Priley Drive. Although it was constructed outside the period of significance and actually predates the building, it is critical to understanding the historic design of the Ordine Building and setting of the property, and is therefore within the boundary and considered a contributing resource. Here we see the plaza. Note the relationship of the cantilevered patio of the building, view to the north. The Ordine Foundation was incorporated in 1933. Originally known as the Albert and Louise Ordine Charity, the organization began with an endowment of $2 million intended to protect direct financial relief to, quote, Duluth's early poor without discrimination to age, sex, color, or religious inclination, end quote. Here's another view of the plaza. The camera is facing east. The Ordine Charity continued to function as a private welfare agency for 3 decades. The relationship between active nonprofit organizations and government agencies experienced a time of significant transposition, as the government greatly widened its role in welfare distribution through New Deal programs during the Great Depression. By the mid-20th century, methods of welfare and relief permanently shifted away from private organizations toward centralized governmental agencies at the state, local, and national levels. Here is a view of the south and west facades, the camera facing northeast. The publication of 2 reports in 1963 highlighted the fragmentation of social services in Duluth and made recommendations for the city's nonprofit sector to increase efficiency and improve program outcomes. Both reports determined that the Ordine Foundation had the potential to play an important role in the successful reorganization of the city's charitable sector, despite the generally negative perception of private charities. At left is a view of the ground floor hallway, camera facing south. At right is a view of the 6th floor office spaces, camera facing northeast. In response to the recommendations and analysis of both reports, the Ordine Foundation shifted away from privately assisting the quote, worthy poor, end quote, to providing financial support for existing nonprofit organizations working to combat poverty in Duluth. The foundation focused specifically on funding organizations rooted in public health and education. Here we see the 1st floor conference space, camera looking southwest. In the 1970s, the foundation began to plan for the construction of a building to support its new vision. The foundation intended to occupy a portion of one floor with the rest of the building leased to other charitable organizations at lower than market rates subsidized by the Ordine Foundation. Here's the 1st floor hallway, camera facing south. The completion of the Ordine building in 1974 marked the beginning of a new era for the foundation, a physical representation of the successful culmination of efforts to integrate modern policies into the historic mission of the organization. By the time the Ordine Foundation moved into the newly constructed building, the program changes made in the previous decade had come to fruition, with half of the grants distributed to other nonprofit organizations. At left is the 3rd floor office space, camera facing north. At right is the 5th floor office space, camera facing northeast. The Ordine building was built specifically for the benefit and support of nonprofits, making it a unique and significant resource. Throughout its use, the building continually provided affordable offices for nonprofit organizations and tenant spaces adapted to changing needs of nonprofit organizations. At left is a view of the 4th floor office space, camera facing southwest. At right is the 2nd floor corridor, camera facing north. The period of significance for this property is 1974 to 1986. The level of significance is local. The National Register criterion is A. The area of significance is social history, and this property meets criterion consideration G. The period of significance begins with the construction of the buildings and ends in 1986 when the Ordine Foundation was surpassed as the leading private community foundation in the city and the county. After construction of the building, the Ordine Foundation expanded its service area to include the entire county and continued to lead the nonprofit sector in Duluth. As the property most closely associated with the exceptional significance of development within the nonprofit sector of Duluth and St. Louis County, the Ordine building meets criterion consideration G, properties that have achieved significance within the last 50 years. The Ordine building represents the culmination of the foundation's efforts to incorporate modern nonprofit practice into historic values, which manifested in the construction of a new office tower to house other nonprofit entities. For this reason, the Ordine building is eligible for listing in the National Register of Historic Places. This property is undergoing rehabilitation as part of a historic tax credit program and has an approved Part 1 by the National Park Service. There is no correspondence related to this property.
Thank you, Jenny.
You're welcome.
All right, we'll move on to the public comment portion. And is there anybody from the public who'd like to speak on behalf of this nomination? So please raise your hand or make it known in the chat. And I'm not seeing anybody. Jenny, or John? No. All right, so let's close the public comment period. In order for the board to discuss this nomination, is there a motion?
Shoot. To make a motion, but I gotta pull up your notes. Or was it? I'd like to make a motion to recommend that the preservation officer approve the nomination. Register of the Ordine building.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Board Member Schulte, second.
Thank you. Any comments from the board? Board Member Schulte,
Well,
and then Board Member Stark.
yeah, I mean, I found this very interesting. And I was especially intrigued. Of course, I'm a historian, enjoys a good scandal, but I'm very interested in the that they suspected, citizens of Duluth suspected it was a cover, the Ordine Foundation, to be a cover for a bank or trust company instead of a charitable organization. Does anyone know more about that? No?
While I
Have to do
appreciate,
more research then, right?
well, yeah, while I appreciate the question, I'm sure that the Google can tell us.
Come on.
I know, I'm sorry. I don't have any more information about
It's just
that.
very interesting.
It is. It
Went
is
through it.
very.
I mean, you think of it not helping charitable organizations, nonprofit, but yet, here they're a front for laundering money or something.
The news would tell us that that's not incredibly uncommon.
No.
Board Member Stark.
Yes, I said as a social, I don't think we've seen one of those, and the type of building it is, and there's just in some ways. Questions. Usually we see a little description of the architect, and I know Damberg, the son of Damberg Peck, and he started the 1956, and he actually taught David Salmela for 20 years before. So a little description of the in Duluth area and for what that did there. The other thing is the building for would be the first question.
I see that the author is here. Phyllis, do you want to address that question? If you couldn't understand it, it's asking about the rehabilitation.
Hi, yeah, I did catch that. So it's currently being renovated or rehabilitated into a like a long stay hotel. And I think maybe some apartments. That was the original plan, but it's shifted now more into the long-term stay hotel.
Okay, thanks, Phyllis. That helps. The question, plans that are in the drawings, walls that they're assuming they're all being demoed, and I'm assuming SHPO and somebody has stuff, but about historic fabric being all over the place, and I'm wondering if some of that has to be saved or not, and how that.
Sure. I can't speak specifically to the designs and what is or is not approved by the National Park Service at this point, but the project is going through a historic preservation tax credit program, or the historic preservation tax credit program. So our office, as well as the National Park Service, are reviewing the designs to ensure that any changes to the property meet the Secretary of the Interior standards for rehabilitation.
Okay. Oh, it's all being gutted and leaving the bathrooms kind of elevated, and that's why I bring up is are they taking away too much character for us to be able?
Yeah, understandably. At this point, if the walls are extant in the photographs, then that's what we judge the property by. We judge the property based on how it exists at the time of nomination, understanding that it is at this point not greatly changed. So if it is being changed during the nomination process, it is incumbent on the consultant to make sure that description stays up to date, and we would let you know if the photographs you saw during review were not the most up to date, but to the best of our knowledge it is at this point.
Better thing to put the existing walls in instead of showing them dashed like they're be the existing conditions.
Yeah, I'm not sure if that means demo or if that means temporary. I don't recall the plan specifically, nor do I have the expertise to read it, but I will look again. Thank you, John. Or okay. Board Member Stark.
The other thing was it talked about the plaza, the same people, and it's there's really not photos of what anything tied in there. You see something. I don't know if that lower level looking really clear on the lower level that goes into the hill. It's part of the lobby or something, but at the plaza, and I was kind of lost on that. Maybe.
I'm not sure that I quite understand. The plaza predates the building, but the building was designed in direct relationship to the plaza, which is why the plaza is included in the boundary and considered a contributing resource. So that was actually a discussion that we had with the National Park Service through the Part 1 process. That's something that we had the author and the developer add as part of the nomination process and the Part 1 process. So we're feeling pretty good about that.
It's kind of the down and they end up at the plaza and they kind of die into the hill. I don't know if there's doors coming out.
The one under right.
I'll read it.
Nope. Right now, you can. I think there's a photograph that shows that there's like a concrete seat, and then a glass wall. So it's just a glass curtain wall. I don't know if I'm using that term correctly, but it's just a sheet of glass. There are no entrances from the building to the plaza at present.
It's going to be another for me.
Good luck. Have fun.
I like the nation. I think
Good.
Voted in.
Yeah.
Thank you. Board Member Gladhill.
I actually had a similar sort of follow-up question. I got fascinated by this and did some of the research on the articles. It talks about a new entrance that's being created. Will it retain the historic entrance as well, do we know? Or will the new entrance be the main one?
I can't speak to that. I don't know. I do know that there have been conversations and there have been discussions about whether a new entrance is appropriate, and if so, where and under what conditions. So right now, I believe that that everything's up in the air until the National Park Service signs off on the Part 2. So.
Okay.
Board Member Radford.
You're on mute.
You're on mute.
I thought I unmuted it. Is that better?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. I just had some comments on the historic materials. I won't go into all of them because I sent them to Ginny already, but I think just a little bit more clarification on what existing materials are historic or not. It's noted in some places, but not everywhere. So I got a little confused in some of the spots. And then this is just for me, my curiosity. It talks about the ceiling tiles and there being 2 foot by 4 foot tiles alternating with 4 foot by 4 foot ceiling tiles, and I've never seen a 4 foot by 4 foot suspended ceiling tile, so I'm just curious if that is the correct dimension. It's so big.
Phyllis?
That is very large. I will double check my dimensions, but I know that there are some really large ones and it's only in certain floors. But thank you very much. I will double check on that.
It's entirely possible. I've just never seen one that big. So
There are some, we had a lot of fun with the ceiling tiles in that building. So.
Yeah, I bet.
This is Stark here. I have seen something that large before. Actually, there was a modular system that was out there about, so it's very possible it could exist.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Jeff. That's all I had. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other comments from the board? I do not see any other hands up, in which case we can move to the motion, which is to recommend that the Deputy State Historic Preservation Officer approve this nomination for listing in the National Register of Historic Places. Those in favor say aye, those opposed say no, starting with Board Member Anderson.
Aye.
Thank you. Board Member Gladhill.
Aye.
Board Member James.
Aye.
Board Member Radford.
Aye.
Board Member Schulke.
Aye.
Board Member Solomonson.
Aye.
Thank you. Board Member Stark,
Aye.
Board Member Terrell,
Aye.
Board Member White,
Aye.
Board Member Worcester.
Aye.
Thank you. And chair votes aye. Motion passes. All right, so we are moving on to the fifth nomination for this evening, the fifth and final, which is the Tyen Central School in Kittson County, presented by Ginny Way. Thank you, Ginny.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is the Tyen Central School in Tyen Township, Kittson County. Laura Bloomquist Hammond, with assistance from Marlis J. Nelson, Steve Martins, and Lawrence Sumner, are the authors. The Tyen Central School, District Number 9 School, more frequently referred to as simply the Tyen Central School, is located in Tyen Township, Kittson County, in the far northwestern corner of Minnesota. The grassy lawn around the school building sets it apart from the surrounding farm fields. To the southwest, the edges of the school property are defined by a grove of deciduous trees. In addition to the school building, the property has a historic hand pump and historic swing set frame situated in an open play space. At left is a map of the township. The Tyen Central School is circled in the center. At right is a map of the property. The historic boundary is indicated with the yellow box. The Tyen Central School building is a large, wood-framed, with a projecting bay on the east facade that holds the central entrance hall and stair tower. The original bell and cupola sit on the ground at the northeast corner of the building. The original hand pump for the wellhead is located in the southeast corner of the building. At left is the primary facade, bell and cupola, camera facing west. At right is the south elevation with hand pump, camera facing north. The school building's exterior was originally clad in woodlap siding. In the mid-1980s, the building was covered in vinyl. In 2022, the vinyl was partially removed from the upper level of the building and revealed the extant upper level window openings on the east, south, and west elevations. At left is the west elevation, camera facing east. At right is the school north elevation, camera facing south. Like many other townships in far northwestern Minnesota, Tyen Township development was shaped by the westward expansion of settlers into the upper Midwest. Early settlers established farms and built churches, schools, and other local institutions as population grew. District Number 9, was formed in the town of Tyen by the Kittson County Board of County Commissioners on July 24, 1882. The original District Number 9 school building was a one-room schoolhouse constructed in 1882. The building was relocated 1 mile south of its original location in 1908 and used as a town hall until 1956. At left, we see the historic swing set in relation to the school building, camera facing northeast. At the upper right is the school circa 1904. Buildings to the west or left in this image of the school are likely a stable and the original one-room schoolhouse in its original location. At lower right is the Tyen Town Hall circa 1908 in its new location. As the number of families grew in the township, the township began to need a larger facility to accommodate larger class sizes. The first one-room school building was replaced with the larger two-story building in 1904. At left is a view of the first floor entry hall and the classroom door, camera facing west. In the center is a decorative stairway to the second floor, camera facing northwest. At right is the mid-stair landing, camera facing east. From 1904 until the early 1930s, classes were held on both floors of the school, with grades 1 through 4 on the first floor and grades 5 through 8 on the second floor. However, enrollment declined beginning in the early 1930s as the number of pupils declined. The second floor classroom was no longer needed and classes were held only on the first floor. Here we see a wide-angle view of the east wall of the first floor classroom. Voting booths are on the back wall, camera facing east. By 1954, the Minnesota State Legislature had passed laws granting educational aid to districts that chose to consolidate. Kittson County was one of the earliest counties in the state to complete this consolidation. In 1954, the last class graduated from the Tyen Central School, and the school was closed. Students were bused to a new school in Consolidated Independent School District number 354 in Kennedy, Minnesota, 14 miles to the east. At left is a detail of the first floor classroom, built-in bookshelves, camera facing southwest. At right is the first floor classroom, camera facing northwest. Although the Tyen Central School building served primarily as an educational facility from 1904 to 1954, it also served as a meeting hall for community activities such as the Homemakers Club, summer parochial schools, the local 4-H club. It was also frequently used as a polling place when school was active. The local governing board of supervisors of Tyen Township purchased the 2-story building for $100 from the school board in 1954 and changed the name to the Tyen Town Hall in 1955. Here we see a wide-angle view of the second floor open classroom, camera facing northwest. The building continued to be used as a polling place for elections through November of 1998, at which time the Tyen Township Board of Supervisors discontinued full-time use of the building. At left is a detailed decorative metal walls and stamped metal ceiling in the second floor classroom, camera facing southwest. At center is the upper stair landing, camera facing east. At right is a detail of the original windows, painted plaster and chalkboards, camera facing west. The period of significance for this property is 1904 to 1998. The level of significance is local. The National Register criterion is A. The areas of significance are education and politics and government. The period of significance encompasses the years that the building served as the school and the town hall. The property does not need to meet criteria consideration G, properties that have achieved significance within the past 50 years, because the bulk, 74 years, of the school's association occurred more than 50 years ago. Constructed in 1904, the main function of the building was educational during the first 50 years. In 1955, the building transitioned to the Tyen Town Hall and was the primary location of governmental activities in the township until 1998. For over a century, the building served as an important community resource for a sparsely populated region of northwest Minnesota. For these reasons, the Tyen Central School is eligible for listing in the National Register of Historic Places. There is no correspondence related to this property.
Thank you, Jenny.
You're welcome.
All right, on to the public comment portion for this nomination. Any members of the public would like to speak, please raise your hand or say so in the chat.
I just want to interject real quick, Chair Ruola Miller, before we get started. I just got a chat from Casey, and her firm did work on the, I think it was the HSR of this property. So I'm going to ask her to recuse herself. She didn't work on it personally, but I think in the interest of clarity and whatever that thing is where you can see through stuff, I'm going to ask.
Transparency.
Transparency. Thank you. I'm going to ask that she recuse herself from this. Thank you.
Okay, so so Board Member Radford then would not be involved in the vote either. Is that correct?
Yes. Sorry.
Yes. Okay. Great. Thank you. Any members of the public? I'm not seeing anybody. Jenny or John, do you? Okay. If not, the public comment period will be now closed. In order for the board to discuss this nomination, may I have a motion?
This is Board Member Gladhill. I'll go ahead and make a motion to recommend that the Deputy State Historic Preservation Officer approve the nomination for listing in the National Register of Historic Places.
Thank you. Is there a second?
This is Board Member Solomonson, and I second the motion.
Thank you. Any comments or questions regarding this nomination from the board? Board Member Stark.
I think it's this school would be, but I would hope they're trying to save it for the community and thing. I think it's very interesting and the steeple aside, and that it kind of someplace and put it in storage. So love here, and it's a very unique looking schoolhouse. It's just seeing doors that are sagging. I've repaired those. It brings back a lot of memories of buildings like that. So
Thank you, Board Member Stark. My understanding is that the current owners are trying to utilize the Legacy Grant Program in order to rehabilitate the property. Laura Bloomquist Hammond is a member of the community, and she worked incredibly hard on this particular property. I want to take the opportunity to thank her for her work. It was more than a 2-year process, and I'm very excited about this one and the work that she did. And yes, there is a lot of love in the community.
that's great.
Thank you, Board Member Terrell.
I just had an observation maybe to boost the context a little bit. There's several references in the document to the school being referred to as 16, sort of suggesting that might be unique, but within the public land survey system, section 16 is set aside for public schools. And this later, we add 36, but the section 16 is centrally located, so it makes sense that that's what the school is. So maybe a little context for that would help.
Absolutely, thank you. I struggled with whether or not to leave it in because it's sort of another nickname for the school, but it is referenced so often. I think additional context would help make that make sense. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? Or Board Member Worcester?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was trying to go back through the nomination form again. Who is the current owner of the property? It says it says public local. Is it county, city, township?
I am not sure that I can answer that question off the top of my head. They are eligible for legacy grants.
So it's probably a local government entity of some sort then?
Yeah, it's probably the township. I don't believe that there is a close incorporated town to the location of the building.
Okay, thank you.
Any other comments? Great, seeing none, the motion before the board is to recommend that the Deputy State Historic Preservation Office approve the nomination for listing in the National Register of Historic Places. We'll vote by roll call. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, please say no. Starting with Board Member Anderson.
Aye.
Board Member Gladhill.
Aye.
Board Member James.
Aye.
We'll recuse Board Member Radford from the vote. Board Member Schulke.
Aye.
Board Member Solomonson.
Aye.
Board Member Stark.
Aye.
Board Member Terrell.
Aye.
Board Member White.
Aye.
Board Member Worcester.
Aye.
And chair votes aye, motion passes. All right, thank you, everybody. All right, so this concludes the presentation of nominations section for this evening. And now we will move on to other business. And one of those other business pieces of our agenda is the election of board officers. So I would like to say thank you to the nominating committee, who was Board Member Radford, Board Member Schulke, and Board Member Worcester for their work in since our last board meeting. And I would like to invite the nominating committee to share the report, which basically you can share the 3 nominations, recommendations for the board officers and anything else you'd like to share. Do we have a member of the nominating committee that would like to speak on behalf?
Well, I guess I can, being the elder statesman.
Go ahead.
Yes, so thank you. So we came up with 3 nominations, and it really was, I want to appreciate or thank people who have agreed to serve. So our new chairman will be Catherine Salmonson, Lindsay Rulon Miller as vice chair, and Bethany Gladhill as secretary.
Thank you. So those are our 3 nominations for our officers, if you will. So just to repeat that, Catherine Solomonson as chair. The rest of the board, if they have a comment or would like to have additional nominations beyond what the nominating committee has gathered.
Chair
if
Rulon
they'll-
Miller,
yeah.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
You
Yeah.
you cut out there for just a minute. Would you mind restating the
Oh.
slate of nominees?
I'm sorry.
Not at all.
Okay, one never knows when they have cut out. Am I okay now?
You
Okay.
are. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so the 3 recommended slate of officers are Catherine Solomonson for chair, Lindsay Rulon Miller, myself for vice chair, and Bethany Gladhill for secretary. So we may vote on the nomination, the recommendations. We will also give an opportunity at this time if any member of the board would like to present a different scenario, a different person for any one of these, any nominations beyond what the nominating committee has already gathered. So if so, please raise your hand or jump in.
Madam Chair, just first parliamentary procedure stickler here, you just basically have to call 3 times if there are any other nominations. And then hearing none, you can entertain a motion to approve the slate of nominations as provided by the committee.
Okay, so I call 3 times. Did that consider 1?
Sure.
Okay, so I actually just do it 3 times. So is
Yes,
there,
you just say, are there any other nominations?
okay, are there any other nominations? I see no hands. And then one more time. Thank you. Are there any other nominations? So then I have on my list here to vote by roll call for all 3. And if that's not the process, somebody let me know.
You need a motion to approve.
Yeah, okay, thank you. So the slate of candidates again is Kate Solomonson for chair, Lindsay Rulon Miller for vice chair, and Bethany Gladhill for secretary. Is there a motion to approve those 3 appointments?
Board Member Anderson, so moved.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Board Member White, second.
Thank you. So we will vote by roll call on all 3 appointments, starting with Board Member Anderson.
Aye.
Board Member Gladhill.
Aye.
Board Member James.
Aye.
Board Member Radford.
Aye.
Board Member Schulke.
Aye.
Board Member Solomonson.
Aye.
Board Member Stark.
Aye.
Board Member Terrell.
Aye.
Board Member White.
Aye.
Board Member Worcester.
Aye.
And chair votes aye. So motion passes. And congratulations on our newly elected officers. Thank you to the nomination committee. So the new officers will begin their term starting our next state review board meeting, which is currently scheduled for November 18th, 2025. All right. Are there any other comments or business items from the SHPO staff?
Well, I just wanted to thank everyone. I know you probably don't always hear it, but there's a lot of reading and preparation that always goes into these meetings. And I really thank you all for your time and volunteerism and your service on this board. It is really valued. And Ginny, you did a great job this evening, keeping it going. So thank you so much. I was just thinking at the start of the meeting, there was a little conversation I joined in on. I think it was talking about small town festivals, including was it the Corn Day or something?
Corn Carnival.
Okay. Well, I just wanted to, an example of this review board and how long it has been around, for pretty much the National Register life. I was at Quarry Days in Sandstone, Minnesota, this weekend, where they had a groundbreaking ceremony for the Sandstone School, which is becoming workforce housing using historic tax credits and a whole host of other resources and funding. And that Sandstone School was listed on the National Register and State Register in the 1970s. So, we talk about, these new properties that are coming on board, and it has been vacant for over 20 years. So a lot of these take a lot of time and effort, and the community was really rallied around this. The Historical Society donated, instead of shovels, they donated the quarry hammers that they found at the quarry, which was, I thought, a very cute touch to the event. But it was really cool to just see the community come forward. And I don't get out much, so I just wanted to share that with everybody, that the history of this board goes back a long time, and sometimes it does take a long time to get rehabbed properties and good uses identified for them. So I really appreciate all your work. And I always like to kind of leave it as a surprise of the properties. I don't really get into them much. Jenny and David do all the work, and I thought this evening's properties were really, there were so many different types, and it was just really fun to see all these presentations. So I will stop talking and let board member Stark have the floor.
Oh, go ahead, board member Stark. I think you're muted.
I wanted to thank board members for the work you've done, the great. It's been really a pleasure to work. Thank you.
I reiterate that, Chair Rulon Miller. It has been a pleasure. We are very, very grateful for you bringing us out of COVID and into the new and professional and more formal world of virtual meetings. So thank you very much for your time. And Board Member Solomonson, I look forward to speaking with you soon, but probably not until September. And we'll set up an opportunity to understand what your input on this role will be.
Thank you, Jenny and team. I think maybe we should end. What do you think? And enjoy the last bits of the night and summer, right? So do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Board Member Schulke, so moved.
All right. Okay. Thank you. This concludes the Minnesota State Historic Preservation Review Board. Thank you, everybody.
Good night.
Have a good night.
Good night.
Thanks, everybody.